Good afternoon, everyone. This is Naishad Gadani coming to you from Melbourne, and it's an amazingly sunny day outside. And we are bringing to you storytelling, particularly in the context of careers and whether you can, what you can do about it. It's what kind of habits do you have to cultivate in order to become, start to tell story and eventually become a good storyteller. Because as I see LinkedIn, there are many people who say that I'm a great storyteller, but whether that translates into a consistent action, whether that really moves people or not, that's an entirely different thing. And I think Caroline did say that in our LinkedIn post that me and Caroline met. I don't remember exactly, but it was exactly an opposite day of today. It was a very muggy, it's like a normal Melbourne day. And we met at a, not particularly a seedy cafe, but yeah, it was a kind of an obscure cafe in Clayton. And that's how our story started of chatting together and working together. After many years, Caroline thought that I'm worthy enough to do a show with her, so that's how I am here doing that show
That's
with
how you're
Caroline.
telling
But
that
it's also,
story. I've got a different version of that.
it's the first person who told the story, right? And it just it I was looking at my phone and looking at all the pictures of our last year's India trip, and at this time I was right in India, and I think it was this week that we found out our fate that the flights will be cancelled. And and 23rd of March is where we started our story of career care package, and today is 199th episode, by the way.
Wow.
We'll score a double century
Mm.
in next week, as well. So why am I saying it? Because you can bring along your cake, coffee, champagne, anything. Send us some pictures of how you want us to celebrate this 200 show. But I will now hand over to Caroline, where she will talk about today's show, and then we'll start to talk with Sandy about storytelling. Caroline.
Thanks, Naish. And Naish has just given the story from the view of the storyteller. It's not quite, didn't take that long. We've worked on many projects leading up to this, but the beautiful thing about Career Care Package is that a lot of the audience, a lot of people have shared their story with us and in the comments, and great things have come out of that. People have created jobs and networks and found jobs from India, being in India and in Australia. So there's been some lovely stories. But today we've got a real expert, because in writing that post last night, I'm like, I'm not in the mood. I can't tell a story about how Naish and I, got together with this. So really super delighted to have you on the show today, Sandy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And so today we're going to talk about storytelling, why it's important, what makes a good story, how it can boost your career, those sorts of things. But I guess a really nice place to start, Sandy, would be to tell us what you've been up to lately and what's come out of 2020 for you.
Oh, thank you. I think like a lot of people, I suddenly found myself with the time to invest in thinking more deeply about how did I bring what I've got to offer to the world. There was just a sudden period of time where things went very quiet, and the solution I developed, which I think will now be ongoing, and I've spoken to so many people and they've got similar stories. Up until the beginning of 2020, I had delivered this storytelling, mentoring and training through either one-on-one coaching, or I'd stood at the front of a room and delivered it through a day's training. And I always felt with the training programs, I would walk away feeling deeply frustrated, because I would be asking people to do some really intense thinking around the clarity piece, like what was their business? What was their purpose? Did they have an articulated purpose? Did they really understand their people? What kind of forensic investigation have they taken to understanding the audience for any communication? And more than that, what were the pain points of that audience, and how would they be able to solve that? Not just the pain, but the symptoms of the pain. if you were interviewing for a job, for example, and the person is looking to fill a particular gap, well, what is happening for that person if they can't fill that gap? And what would happen for them if they could fill the gap? And therefore, how did storytelling work in that space? So we'd be going through these really intense, deep questions that require much more thought and process than just the couple of hours that I could give to them in a workshop, long before I got to the actual craft of storytelling, or how you went about gathering your stories. So I came up with a program that was broken into 3 parts. One I called Basic Foundational Business Skills, that even, in my experience, even established professionals and established businesses don't always have clarity on some of these key things. The purpose and principles are 2 that you'd normally get. I'd ask the question and I'd get chapter and verse. I'm not looking for that. You need to be succinct and relevant and clear. And so I developed this 3-part program. That was 7 weeks. And then we went into Storytelling Mastery, which was 3 weeks. And at the end, we came up with a pitch or an interview or a presentation. So whatever was relevant to the participant in terms of how they constructed that around, that was purpose-led and it was story-based, and therefore infinitely more compelling to listen to as communication. And also I created it as a group program because, you just find that people, the collective intelligence of a group of people is way more than the sum of its, parts. So I can bring my knowledge, but when you bring that knowledge and mix it into the fray of 3 other people, all, striving to be their best and to learn how to tell stories, it's incredible, the power of collective intelligence. So I don't think I could ever go back to standing in front of a room, because I don't feel I would help people embed the practice of storytelling. Whereas this way, I feel people leave with an embedded practice. So that's what came about.
Yeah. I was just reflecting as you're speaking, it's interesting because that process that you've described for businesses is very much a process that would set people up for job searching as well. It's really digging deep into who you are, and, it might be different stories that have repeated in your career, that there's this theme that emerges from that, and then really understanding the pain points of an employer. And I love what you said about what would happen if they didn't fill the role is an excellent question to ask, because then you really understand what the critical things are and, the impact on the business. So, a lovely approach of, the work that you do.
Well, I think that storytelling is overlaid with empathy. I think there's a real piece around empathy in terms of storytelling. That idea of what would happen to them if that gap that they're advertising for was not filled, is the opportunity to get inside their head and not be only in your head and in their shoes. And I know that the few times that I've reached out for help for people where I'm really struggling, I'm overwhelmed, or it's a piece of expertise that I just don't have and I'm struggling with it, and you get that feeling that the person you're talking to can actually solve that problem, it is the most incredibly wonderful feeling of relief. You feel like a burden is lifting off your shoulders. So if your storytelling can give that person that feeling that they're going to be relieved of this burden that they're carrying, because after all, if there's a gap, it's a burden. I feel like that's a really different way to think about it, rather than just filling the gap with, well, I'm this and I'm that and I'm fabulous and I'm wonderful and I've worked here and I've done that. Yes, there is room for that, of course there is, but it's that empathy piece that I think we miss so much in communication.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things is that storytelling also takes a while for the effect to reach to the right audience as well. I also wanted to ask you, in where we are seeing, specifically around careers where people are looking for promotions or jobs, So they suddenly get active on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, whichever is the target audience that you are looking at. It's people do the bulk of the work, but they don't spread that out during the quiet period. They don't spread that out consistently, right? Because I feel that is, it's like, because I'm looking for work now, I will be more active. I'll reach out to a few people. I'll start to post some content on it. But that doesn't stick to people's head, is it? The people think, yeah, you know what? It's not, it's not consistent. Tell us about the habit of consistency in storytelling and the effect of that on the audience.
Such a great question. Thank you. Because obviously I've already talked about clarity as being a critical component of that absolute understanding of who you are. In this case, what job do you want? What companies would you want to work with? What position, and what do you want to contribute, and what would make your career sparkle and be exciting? And I guess that's the work that you guys are doing. So it's that deep clarity piece, isn't it? So the next component for me is the curiosity piece, which comes to that understanding of developing that empathy around the organization and the people that you might work with, or the teams that you might contribute to, and how you would contribute and how you'd make a difference. And there's a piece around that that's about insights. Now, I think if you've been in your career and you've developed expertise and experience over a period of time, you are sitting at a number of intersections, because we're all unique. You may be an accountant, but the way in which you've come to your, let's say, forensic accountant's career has taken a number of different paths. You've met different people, you've worked for different people, and all of those intersections add to your particular value and your expertise. And you've developed insights around your aspect, your career. And those insights, an insight in and of itself is a fact in context. So an insight is that here's the data around, say, the number of people that need forensic accounting. And then there's a cause of that. Well, because, maybe when a partnership breaks up, people have got trusts and blah, blah, blah. And there's a consequence of it. But it's still an insight. It's still a piece of information. It's not, in and of itself, it might be fascinating, but it's not enough to stick in people's brains. When you wrap a story around that insight, that is when the whole thing starts to have emotional resonance, because you really want the person who reads your information or watches your video to go, that person's inside my head. They've got it. They understand it. It's developing that prescience, and that's the realm of domain expertise. So if you haven't got the job you want yet and you're looking for it, what you go about doing now is developing domain expertise. So all your content is about, it's not grandstanding. It's not putting up a thing saying, look how wonderful and how fabulous I am, the best forensic accountant or the best executive manager or whatever the position might be. It's that deep, granular understanding of that expertise and the insights that support that expertise, because that's true. When you've developed expertise, you've got insights into your career, you've got insights into your industry niche, and the people that industry niche serves. So it's digging out the stories that support those insights, that support that understanding, your understanding. And you can get quite granular here. I use the word granular because I think people, when you talk about storytelling, automatically think that it's epic. It's the hero's journey. It's the big story, that somehow you've got to encapsulate everything that you are into the story. And that's not, this is where the consistency piece comes in. So I might tell a seemingly completely unrelated story. The expertise, the craft is in pulling the threads of that story in at the end to the key point that you want to make. So you never ever tell a story without an intention. So you think to yourself, all all right, my intention for today, and this is why having a personal purpose, understanding the values by which you work. If you're a business, the principles, the operating framework, but if you're an individual, you'll have values that you bring to your expertise. Understanding that is, today I'm going to showcase the importance of transparency in my industry, or the importance of being rigorous or detailed or careful or analytical or strategic. You know, there'll be a bunch of those kind of attributes that employers would be looking for. I'm going to showcase that, and I'm going to tell a story that you know, maybe about how I cook an omelette, literally. But what you're showcasing in the story is you're not the kind of omelette maker that smashes the eggs and there's bits of shell everywhere, and you know, you haphazardly mix the omelette and then leave the fork on the board, which means there's raw egg on the board, and then you drop it into the pan and bits of egg go everywhere, and then you've forgotten to put the seasoning in, so you quickly add it at the end. If you're precise, if precision means something to you, you could tell that story of watching somebody make that omelette and how it made you go, oh, that's not how I would make an omelette. And what you do is you showcase the precision with which you have to make an omelette. Now, the right person looking for somebody with a very precise approach to work would go, I like this person. I'm glad they're not a sloppy omelette maker. And I think the beauty about that is storytelling is always fresh, always fresh. So on Sunday, I was sitting here working away, editing a book that I'm writing, and there was a knock on the door, and it was an urgent knock, enough for me to go. And there was an old dude standing there. He had a mask on, and he looked absolutely miserable and unhappy. And he asked me if he could weed the garden in exchange for a cup of tea and some money for a meal. And so I took pity on him. I went to make the tea. When I came back, he'd stopped doing the weeding, but he took his mask off and he started to tell me his life story, and he started to sing. And I didn't have a mask on. I was kind of backing away without trying to be rude and one thing and another. Later on, I was running late, and I saw the cup, and I ran and put it in the sink, and I was late, so I got in the car, didn't wash my hands. That morning at 3 a.m., my brain woke me up and said, you were not wearing a mask and you didn't wash your hands. Are you going to be ground zero and a super spreader? It's all your fault. And I said, thanks for reminding me, snap back. And I wrote that story in LinkedIn, but the piece I put at the bottom was every conversation we have with our brains is a story. Now, not all of them are useful, but some of them inform what you have to do differently, how you've got to, develop a new discipline or be more mindful about something. So in my space, I can tell that kind of story because what I'm showcasing is the fact that we have these stories. Now, mostly people will just let them go and they disappear into the ether. When you practice storytelling, you have to bring these, you become so aware, you have an antennae that tunes in and your brain goes, I could tell that story, because it's a really great demonstration of the fact that we're carrying these stories in our brain conversations all the time.
It's a funny thing, Sandy. I saw that post that you put and I read it and I'm like, because it intrigues. You're like, where's this going? It's going somewhere. Something's coming, and the lovely little thing that you drew out of that around, activating your brain and curiosity and so forth. I just thought it was a really nice way to talk about it. And I think, if you're sharing stories like that on LinkedIn or wherever, the fact that you're, it's allowing people to connect, like, again, going back to job seekers, it's allowing people to connect, but you're showing a passion for what you do, which is just as critical as well.
Yes, 100%. And I feel like, a story like that might not be relevant for a forensic accountant, for example, and the kind of business they're trying to get. But that isn't to say that you can't tell a personal story that showcases an attribute or showcases empathy for attributes or empathy for clients who are going through, a client who requires forensic accounting is probably going through a great deal of pain one way or another, business bust up or a personal or something like that. And so your ability to showcase your empathy for those people has to be attractive, I would think, to an employer, because they would say, this person gets the importance of the work they're doing. It's not just a numbers game, it's a people game.
Absolutely.
Also wanted to understand the validation of the story as well from your view. If I share a story, one side I'm thinking that this story is only moving or it has touched if I get validation of it. On social media, we're looking at whether there are how many likes do I get or how many comments do I get. Right? That's the one measurement that I have. In numbers, I can easily see whether this resonated or not. What are your thoughts on the validation of that, whether it is touching? How would you really figure out that it has touched, or it is being touched with the right intent that you have? Because the counter one, this kind of suspicious and more cynical side of my brain also says that I've seen enough of stories where people are walking by and they see somebody, they drop something and they suddenly have a life, like a light bulb moment that goes off, and then they share, humongous, what did they learn out of that ice cream that fell down, and that's how their life is and everything else. So it just gone absolutely berserk on sometimes on social media. How would you differentiate from that, kind of very scattered and very sort of idealistic, kind of storytelling to something that is, you are genuine about it and you've got, a genuine intent to share, but not to just get validation and just so that you feel amazing and your ego floats in the air for a while. How would you really judge that, Sandy?
Oh, another very deep and multi-layered question. So I'll start with, I think I'll start with the end part, which is the storytelling, the kind of storytelling that you were describing, Nation. It's I know exactly that kind of storytelling, and I tune out. That storytelling is there's a kind of vanity around it. There's a sort of, it's ego-based. It's very I-based. It's not really there to serve. It's more to just highlight the particular insight or uplifting moment that person has. Very rarely is there a component of that kind of storytelling where you can go, I've learned something from that. So it comes back to this double component, which is, let's assume you're passionate about what you do, and you're passionate about trying to get to further your career and trying to work with a particular kind of organization, particular industry. And the reason you're passionate about your career is because you kind of know that you can make a difference, either to the organization as a great team member or contributor, or to the actual end client, in terms of how you work with the organization to service that client. So there's a making a difference component to that passion, because I think if you're not passionate, it's because you've possibly got another set of values involved, and they're not the same that are about making a contribution, making a difference. Even if you are looking to become a leader in your field, it's because you're looking to make a difference and be a great leader and contribute that way. So it comes down to whatever that component is of that passion, the end recipient of that care and desire to make a difference. Who is that person? Because all your communication should be aimed at serving that person, even if it's your boss in an organization, or your team in an organization, or the end client. Who are they? because unless you know that, your storytelling will be exactly that. It'll be scattered, it'll be irrelevant to the audience. I tell a story which I think really highlights this, about taking my daughter to a seminar when she was pregnant. And the seminar was about the impact of mental unwellness on an unborn fetus. And she had an interest in that because she was a counsellor. And the room was full of lay people. And there were two presenters. And the first presenter was a pediatrician from a well-known hospital who delivered a 40-minute talk, basically from a PowerPoint, as if the room was full of pediatricians. Now, if it had been full of pediatricians, it would have been a fascinating talk, dry and very academic. But as we were lay people, it did not emotionally resonate with us. The second presenter spoke from his expertise, which was very similar, but he told stories about the mothers and how they felt, and the work that he was doing to offset the impact of mental unwellness on a fetus, and about the fetus and how it impacted, in story after story after story. And honestly, the room was electric. It was palpable how he'd engaged us, and we were all firing questions at him at the end. He understood his audience. He told stories that were relevant to us, and every single story had an intention. He wanted us to read more, learn more, develop more healthy habits, etc., etc. So every story had an intention. And his purpose was to help women who had mental unwellness and were pregnant. And that was so obvious. And I think that is the critical component. So that is the piece you have to do the work on before you tell a story. It's always there to serve. And yes, there can always be a transactional piece. Like if you'd like to learn more about why I think this way, visit my website, or I'd love to talk to you, or could we have a cup of coffee, or, I'm available, I'd love to come. There's always a call to action, but it's not a sell. It's not hire me, I'm up. And I don't know whether that's answered all those questions or not.
It's a really interesting thing because, on social media, on LinkedIn, I was reading some stats that the most popular posts are how-to posts, but that's because everybody writes how-to posts, which is not anything around storytelling. It's like obviously sharing some expertise, but the space is kind of flooded with that. And your story about helping the homeless man, it really stood out because it was different from what people put. And also the inspirational saying type posts, I kind of just have it's just a wall of nothing, because it is a wall of nothing type thing. That's not really, it is that kind of scattergun. It's not really resonating unless you just happen to have that feeling at that particular moment type thing. So yeah, I feel like, that story that you gave about your daughter and the conference really hits home with that kind of making that real connection with, taking care to illustrate how the story that you'll tell to illustrate that point that you want to make, or make that connection.
I think compelling communicators are very attractive. And my goal to work with people is to help them become orators, domain experts. And I feel like the moment you are seen as a domain expert, your chances of reaching the career goals that you want to reach are going to be amplified. It's like everything, it's a craft. It has to be practiced. There's another aspect to that question you asked, Nation. I think I should just answer that, which is that you asked me, how did I know? Was it likes or links or whatever? So I am telling stories specifically for a particular audience, who I have been diligently connecting to that audience over a long period of time in LinkedIn and in Facebook. I also know the science of storytelling, because I know that when you read a story that engages you, it's activating neurochemicals in your brain. The research around this is now beautifully proven through multiple experiments over decades, and with people like the American military who understand the power of storytelling. they know that you can only move people to shoot other people through storytelling, which is kind of cynical, the dark side of it. And we do know people who've been wonderful storytellers for dark reasons. Hitler was a commensurate storyteller. So there's a lot of science that backs it up. It actually focuses attention and it releases oxytocin, which develops this sense of trust, the sense of, I feel safe with this person, feel safe in their space. And that's whether it's read or delivered by video or delivered in person to person. It mirrors neurons. And so I know that that's happening when people are reading my stories. And the fact that there may not be as many likes and links and shares as the people that are reading them, it's often that I will meet somebody and they'll say, oh yes, I've been reading your stories for ages, and I know that you're a storyteller. And they can remember certain stories. That's the other thing, is that stories build recall, not only of the story itself, but of you as a person. And so I guess this is all part and parcel of becoming the domain expert. And really, why wouldn't you, in your career, you've put the hours in, you've put the 10,000 hours in. If you're at the point where you're sort of trying to shift up and become a leader or get a better job or get promotion, you've put the 10,000 hours in. You are an expert. So why wouldn't you be seen as a domain expert? And, that takes communication, and it isn't the how-tos. The how-tos can be very interesting if you're right in that space, right at that moment. But I would say to people who want to do how-tos, stretch it out over 5 or 6 posts and do number 1 and tell a story that validates that point. And then number 2, and tell a story that validates, because people remember that. They won't remember the list of 5 things. And in doing that, you've developed a sense of being a domain expert, knowing what you're talking about.
One of the themes that Naish and I have been dedicated, or want to dedicate this year to, is making change through habits in various ways. And I guess a question for you is, how do you make it a habit to tell your story? What are some of the habits of good storytellers? That
So
might be true, but how do you make a habit to
look, I think becoming I have found the habit of being a regular LinkedIn poster brilliant. Even though I was a storyteller, and so I habitually will think, oh, that's a story, or I've read a story and I think, oh, I could share that story, because curated story, by the way, is a totally valid way of sharing stories. It's someone else's story. In fact, very often, a curated story is very powerful, because if you're able to comment on somebody else's expert opinion, that in itself builds a sense of your expertise. But you're also sharing their insights. So curated story is a great way of building your story dialogue. But since I started posting in LinkedIn, it's been about 3 years now that I've been doing it very, very consistently, at least 2 to 3 times a week. The habit of having to write a story in 1,300 characters, about roughly 250 words, has been the best discipline for somebody who might otherwise tempted to maybe add in just those little extra pieces that sound great but don't necessarily add to the story. You become, all the fluff goes, you learn how to get rid of any words that don't serve the sentence, serve the meaning of the sentence or the paragraph. You have to reserve a small part at the end that brings the threads together, shares the idea worth sharing, or has a call to action in it. I don't always have an interactional piece, but I'll often say, if you'd like to learn more about storytelling, please just PM me, or there's a link in the comments below. So that is a wonderful discipline to start the process. So it might mean in the first instance that you're a little bit stuck and you find that you are tending to share the dot points and the benefits, and you might be a little stilted, but just by pushing that through and honing the craft, you do start to free up and begin to think, you know what, I could share that story of making an omelette because there's a really good piece at the end that talks about the benefit of being precise in such and such a career, or detailed, or whatever, or empathetic, or, you know, I mean, they're all the attributes that. So I guess I would say to people, start with this clarity piece. Start with trying to articulate your purpose. Start with listing the things that really are important to you and that you would bring to any career that your position that you wanted to get. Get detailed about the people you're speaking to. You're speaking to a team leader, then only speak to team leaders. Don't worry about the rest of the world. You're speaking to a CFO or a HR manager. Who are you talking to? And hone your communication for that person, and then start to get into their minds, because when you do, you'll develop the stories that they will resonate with. Oh, that was a great story. That person's in my head. So I think that's a really great, and of course that does translate to Facebook and Twitter. But I think the LinkedIn 1300 character piece is just a wonderful discipline.
Very much so. And I remember I've had a blog for many years, and my first post was so stilted, and I look back on my old posts and I go, oh my God. But gradually it's been, like, I really enjoy, I guess, communicating and training is, you know, and just the act of writing and the clarity that comes from that as well. Yeah, it's a great skill to have.
You've honed your craft. And you've done that through practicing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think there's
one of the
way
things
to
that
do it.
always, Sandy, one of the things that I have included in my introduction, if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, to I always say that, as you would have figured out from my accent, that I come from the end of butter chicken in Bollywood, and I think people remember that, because it sticks them. It's real. It's no fluff. I have no problem. I have an accent. And I come from this one. People just laugh at that and say, they'll come and talk to me, because that is the only thing that sticks to them. Nothing else, by the way.
Yep.
Nothing else. How amazing I am. No, nothing else sticks to them. It's just the butter chicken in Bollywood sticks to them and say, yep, Nisha, that was good. Let's tell me what you do. I said, okay, all right, this is what I do. But I think, also one of the things that I have done on LinkedIn, not even before the career care package thing, is that for many years I used to share resources on LinkedIn. I would have done, and I've shared this hack with everybody. It's nothing particularly rocket sciences about it, but I've subscribed Google alerts on many different words. And when I receive them, I look at the article and say, that's fascinating, I'll just share that. And I think that was one habit that I cultivated over a period of 3-4 years. So I would be sharing out resumes, career change, everything to do with career. I'll find something and I'll continue to share. And that's how people know me. People say, oh, you've got so much resources, you've got so much, things happening. But because that's the consistency that I kind of cultivated over many years. But I agree with on that part that the audience, knowing the audience is incredibly important, because those are the audience. And one of the things that I'll tell you, I don't know about Caroline, but my wife was volunteering during the COVID times in the second lockdown. And she went to, a reservoir. They were, setting up, the DHHS was setting up a truck there to educate, multicultural communities around testing and everything else. And a couple of guys came to my wife and, they saw her name and said, Nisha's wife? And this, yeah. Oh, we see Nisha every LinkedIn. We just wanted to let you know that how thankful we are for the work that he does. I said, hang on, they never interacted with me. Never. right? And I think that is also things, right, in story, that you don't know the impact that it has on people. On, it might take 1 2 year for you to find that validation, or somebody would say, what you're doing is amazing. I think it takes that while, isn't it, sometimes?
It does. It does. I think it's a patience game. I don't think there's ever a magic bullet for anything, really, is there? You've just got to do the work. But I love that. I love the fact that they recognised her name, and that's fabulous. And that story about the butter chicken in Bollywood, there's a lovely alliteration there. So there's that lovely cadence, which is really interesting, because you probably don't even realize that the butter chicken in Bollywood has that double B thing, and that people, we respond to that kind of rhythmic, poetic piece, and that's really part of the crafting of stories. But also you get rid of the speed hump immediately in people knowing that you're from another country by saying it, and then that's out of the way, like you said, and then now they've got an intro to talk to you. I've got a really great storytelling friend called Yamini Naidu. She's also from India, and she always tells some kind of hilarious story about her mother wanting her to be an economist, and she ended up as a storyteller. So she tells that, and it does exactly the same thing. So it's a great communication tool. Yeah.
So Sandy, when you write your stories, do you do a brain dump and write them all at once, or do you edit as you go? How do you what's the production process for you?
I've been cheating a little bit of late, I have to say, and going back to some of my older work, even some of the blogs that I wrote back in 2010, and seeing whether they've got any validity in today's world. And interestingly, they do. They're still talking about all the same principles: clarity, curiosity, etc. But they need a rewrite, because they're talking about blogging or online or something. So I rewrite them with the lens of storytelling. So that's currently what I'm doing, because I'm going to compile a book that basically the book is how to tell stories, but it's told through the stories that I've written about how to tell stories. And then I'll deconstruct it on the other side, like what worked about the story, the language, the structure, the story arc, the call to action, etc. So that's what I'm currently doing. Before that, I would often, because I've tuned in my storytelling antennae, see something on a morning walk, or not the ice cream, not the aha moment, and come back and write it. And then I don't tend to post something I've written on that day. I tend to sit with it for a while, because I really would like to make sure that I've given it enough thinking and processing to make sure that it is hitting the mark. And one of those stories which I just loved was seeing a dog walker picking up dog poo, and as we walked past, she had the bag with the poo in it, and as we walked past, we said good morning, and she went, good morning, in that sort of like, and I said to my husband, no, she didn't, she said hi. She said hi. And I said to my husband, there's so many syllables in that word hi. What was she really saying? And we determined that she was saying, look, I know I've got dog poo, and it's not really the best thing in the world, but I love my dog and it's the right thing to do. And all of that came through in that one greeting. And we were discussing the power of the English language, that just the intonation and that hi carried all that meaning with it. So I was able to use that to say how we need to look at our words, and what are they really saying? What's the agenda under that word, those words? Like the word of course. When you say of course to some people, what you're really saying is, how dumb are you that you don't know that? You've got to be very forensic about language. But that was such a lovely story to tell around the power of language.
It's funny, I've been doing a morning swim, and people with dogs are a great conduit to having a conversation. But I think part of it is because a lot of dogs on the beach are like, I'm so happy to be here, I'm so happy to be here, I'm so happy to be here, that you just can't, you want to go up and say hi to the dog, basically, and then start talking. So, yeah.
And then, just that story, it's a short story, but you've conjured up in my brain the beach. I've got the beach, I've got you walking, I've got this dog or dogs bouncing around and their thought bubbles being, oh, this is fantastic, I love it, I'm so happy. Yeah. If you were trying to get across to somebody the power of communicating the energy around happiness, what better story could you tell than that? I mean, doesn't that just evoke, that is what it's like to exhibit that free-flowing joy of being alive that, we humans we're not that great at, but dogs just do it so well. How beautiful is that as an evocation of that spirit? And it's
because everyone connects with the dog. Everyone's seen dogs that are so happy, they're just happy to be here.
And so you've actually given a wonderful example of exactly how we can find these little gems. Like they don't have to be epic stories, but it is a story because I'm on that beach, I'm feeling that, I'm seeing the dog.
Yeah, lovely.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sandy. It's been fascinating to catch up with you and deepen our understanding of storytelling, and also in the context of careers as well. If people are not following Sandy McDonald, please go and check her LinkedIn feed, because she mentioned she does share and tell stories, and they are beautiful and touching as well. So please connect with Sandy, and thank you again, Sandy, for being gracious and really, summing it up, what we've been also trying to say during the COVID times as well. And we wish you all the best for the book. And we obviously wish to connect with you offline as well and catch up for a coffee, since the restrictions will
do that now.
Be easing. Yes. Exactly, that's right. And me and Caroline have been planning something big. It's just that we are not sure when MCG will be available. So we'll just wait for we will let everyone know.
You're both wonderful to talk to. Thank you. It's been an absolute delight.
It's been fantastic to have you here, Sandy. So if you're not following the hashtag Career Care Package, please follow the hashtag. Next week we have Dre McLaughlin. We haven't really decided a topic with Dre, but he is a great storyteller as well around improving your skills on interviews and job search. So please tune in next week, and I'll hand back to you, Nish.
Thank you very much, everyone. And next week is our 200th episode. As I said, you can celebrate in your own style as well. And me and Caroline are always open to receive gifts as well. So if people are feeling very generous, they can always ask us for bank details or address, and we will be happily sharing that with you. But regardless of that, have a great weekend, everyone. And we will see you on next Friday. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.